All right, welcome back. We are INFR3335U, Social and Multiplayer Game Design in the Fall 2021 semester at Ontario Tech University, and it's week 3, part 2 of our broadcast. In the last video that we made, we were talking about the assignment details, and I went into quite a bit of detail around the assignments and when they're due. Some things to note is, again, just as a reminder, assignment 1 due Monday, assignment project part 1, that's due Sunday, and you've got your ILE in lab exercise 2, that's due Friday. So that's coming up right now. So for now, for this part, I'm going to be starting to talk about designing mobile games and some challenges around that. Again, you're encouraged to participate, ask questions, and those kind of things as we move forward. All right, so why then? We've talked about narrative design, last week a little bit when we had our guest speaker. And this time I want to really talk about, again, kind of the push to create a mobile game, some pros and cons about stuff that you'll be seeing, and some industry terms and metrics that you're going to be using as course learning outcomes, and things that we're going to use for the midterm test that's coming up in just a couple of weeks. We're sitting at week 3 on that, and your midterm exam is in week 5. Remember that in week 5 for your midterm exam, there'll be 2 components. One of them will be your a written component, which what I'm doing is I'm hoping you're going to practice on some of this stuff. So again, your guest lecture number 2 is happening next week, and they'll give you another opportunity to practice writing a short blog. Again, nothing too long, pictures allowed, about world building, which is what we're going to be talking about. And then in your midterm, you'll have a short blog to write in your midterm, and there'll be a technical component. You'll have the entire exam week to do both. Again, they'll be worth each 5% of your final grade for a total of 10% for your midterm exam. And again, open book, take home, open internet, and no time frame. So you get it on the Monday, as an example, open up early, and then you'll have until the Sunday to get it done. So the entire week before you go on your study break, which is during Thanksgiving week. Okay, that's what's happening for not next week, but the week after. And again, we should have everything ready for you. The TA and I, so Stephen and I, are going to get together and put together the technical aspect as well as the theoretical aspect for your midterm exam, most likely on the weekend. So you'll have everything we'll start getting you going on that soon. Okay, again, nothing out of the blue. And it's going to be based on the slide information, the content, and some things that you've heard from the guest speakers as well, because that's part of our content. Okay, so that is what's coming up from a lecture perspective. Let's talk about mobile games. So why make mobile games? And I've got the mobile design cycle here. This is a great little article if you're interested in reading. It's a little bit old, but the great thing is it talks about how to start and what happens as you go through your release stages until you get some feedback. And if everything is good, you release it to market. The development cycle is much shorter than typically much shorter than a full-blown AAA kind of game. Why? Because again, I've known some people that have knocked a kind of a small little mobile game off in over a weekend. Again, is it very complex? No. But again, to put it up on the Google Play Store is fairly straightforward. To put it up on Apple, on the Apple Store is not straightforward and requires a few more hoops to jump through and some approvals. And so that's something that we're going to be focusing on. We're going to be focusing on for you to make an Android game that potentially you could ship or put together by the end of semester. All right. So to post on the on the Google Play Store. Questions that Kimberly asked are the midterms take home? Absolutely. Are they open book? They are, and you've got unlimited time from the beginning of the week to the end to get it done. All right. So I'm not going to try and put you in a box or time limit you in any way. So that's one thing. So shorter development cycles, the ability to be your own publisher. These are all pros, right? Faster payments because you can kind of have things like in-app purchases and so on. No need to own your own servers. You can use cloud-based services and so on that are available very simply through some out-of-the-box tools and immediate feedback from players. Okay, so that's kind of the impetus. We talked about some of this before, right? Some bad things. One bad thing is you're on your own. Okay, so let's talk about this as pros and cons together. Low initial investment required for players joining your game means they really don't have a lot of skin in the game, right? They don't need to stick around when you're making a mobile game. If your customers don't like your game, your players, they move on and they paid very little, if anything at all, right? Which is kind of something that happens. And again, this can really affect the bottom line. It can even put you out of business if that's the kind of business that you're creating. And again, it's not like you have a huge team of people that are going to help you, from a marketing perspective. It's just you and your small little team, typically. Especially if you're an indie developer, you can't rest. There's so many things that are happening. Your competitors, if you do really, really well, they're going to copy you. And especially, I've seen a lot of things like reskinning of games. So you have a game that comes out, Angry Birds, or you have a game that comes out that you've seen before, and they just reskin the game and produce that game. It's the exact same, 2048, as the game that you made as that first game. And sometimes the game is even better than the one you've created, right? So it can happen. They'll try and copy you mercilessly if you don't protect yourself. Even if you try to copyright your IP and so on, it's very challenging to fend people off, especially when they're bigger than you are. You're not done. Let's say you do produce a great game, you fend off your competitors, you're able to really have an interesting game people want to play. You really have to start building your portfolio games up. You want to make more than one title because they're just going to move on. They're going to go to your competitor's market. And the biggest, one of the biggest competitors out there from a mobile perspective is Nintendo, believe it or not. They're huge. And it's hard to compete against them altogether. Here, there's a great article here about the Unity distribution portal and how it can help you in terms of producing your game. Nothing's free to you. So if somehow you ramp up and you continue to throttle up your players, then the server cloud costs are going to go up, and you're going to continue to pay again, because a lot of times when we start off making mobile games, it's pay as you go. Okay. Cheaters sometimes win, and sometimes we make a game in Unity or another game engine, Unreal, as an example, and we don't know it, but there's an exploit that comes up. It's not a syntax error or even a systemic error. It's just we didn't realize, but there's a way of cheating in our game. And as soon as someone figures that out and they start talking about it on Discord or somewhere else, that's it. Your game, there's an exploit, and you have to really work quickly to nerf it before. Ethan says there's always a way to cheat. Absolutely. But the idea is either you nerf it or you create a creative mode that can a lot of times advance those players to explore your game in a casual way, and it sometimes stops cheaters and stuff, and actually exposes exploits as well. So be careful about the exploits that are out there. One thing is you need to, what it says here is you now live to please, which is really true. You're going to be your own support department, all right? If you're a small group of developers, and a lot of times we start small, we make mobile games, and there's a problem with your game, sometimes people are on their own. You're kind of one person makes the game. I know people that have done that. They put a game together, like I said, over the weekend. There's some problems. A person can't install it on a certain Android device or an iOS device. They're having issues. You're your own support department, and there's no one that can help you out there. Also, one thing to note is it's not like it's going to stop, because one thing about Android is there's not all devices are homogeneous, that we've talked about before, and like for example, the Android operating system, you might have a different version of the Android operating system from your friend, and you might have a completely different device that has different capabilities. Whereas Apple devices are a little bit more homogeneous. Most of them are on iOS 14 right now, and as an example, and a lot of them have even, these early adopters have even put together or downloaded and installed iOS 15, which was just officially released, right? So again, it's, you have to come up with your game, and sometimes you have to update your game with the new, actually most of the time, with the new version of iOS. So one thing that we're going to see is that making kind of mobile games. There's some design philosophies that we're going to be talking about. I'm going to use this slide as a reference slide, and we're going to talk about some really good design philosophies that can help you think about things that work well with all mobile games. So here's one of them. Make it easy to start playing. I think this is a really great one. So remember that the user story behind mobile games in general, and in the touchscreen is kind of a pick up and play for a lot of times and with very little investment. So again, one of the truisms here that they talk about is you lose 50% of your users for every additional touch it takes them to find what they're looking for in your interface and for your game itself. So make it easy to start. Don't introduce barriers between your user and getting started in the game. Get them into it as soon as possible. So now, how does that translate back into what you're doing for me for your GEW project equivalent? Remember that you want to make it so that the user interface is intuitive, and it's something that that makes sense. We'll talk about more about user interface design later on in the course. Make it easy to stop playing. I mean, remember that most players, when they play a mobile game, they're at a doctor's office or something like that. They're going to start, or they're somewhere else. They're waiting for something to happen. And like we talked about last week, and you don't want it for them to be, locked into a big time commitment. So again, make it easy for them to stop playing the game. And this kind of ties into what we talked about last week and the week before, right? So not too much of a time commitment. All right. And a lot of times what we say is, if you're a hardcore gamer, you're like, I just want one more level to do, just one more puzzle, one more thing to do. Again, this kind of scenario, it applies less to mobile games than a PC or a console. Okay. And the other thing to think about is that some people play mobile games at work. I mean, it happens, especially now in this remote, ever-connected, disconnected world I kind of talked about before, and no one can really see what you're playing. Heck, if you're on watching Zoom right now, I'm sure some of you are even playing games when I'm doing my lecture. But when you're at work, sometimes you can play a mobile game, and when there's a lull, when there's not somebody there or whatever, and again, it's got to be something that you can close down instantly. You give the options for the user to close it down. Again, it's all down to the ability for you to be able to make camp or stop playing quick save, like you're saying there, Leo, because you know what? At the end of the day, if you make it so it's difficult, then people aren't going to play your game. If they lose their progress when you shut your game or you lock your phone or something, that's a terrible thing that happens, and no one wants that. When they're playing a game, they'll just not return to your game. Eventually, they're going to get so frustrated with you. Here's one, and this is the social aspect of this course is called Social and Multiplayer Game Design. Make it easy to play with your friends. One thing that we're going to ask you to do this semester is make your game mobile and make your game multiplayer. That's like assignment 4 coming up, right? Or not assignment 4, but your project parts as you can continue going. One of your releases is also going to include a multiplayer component, right? So why? Because, hey, the best mobile games are social, like we've talked about before. And again, think about features that are intuitive and streamlined. Okay, you want to be able to join with your friends very easily. It shouldn't be that you're, kind of again jumping through hoops for that to happen. It should be very straightforward connection. Matchmaking should be very easy. And again, you should be able to disconnect very easy as well. So make it easy to play with friends. The other one is, how about money? All right. A lot of times people want to monetize right away. They're like, okay, I want to monetize. I want to charge $1 for this extra feature. I think the wisdom now is let the user or the player decide how much they want to play or how much they want to pay. Don't make it so that you're going to make a game that is, pay to win or even pay to play. All right. That's not the kind of game typically that works these days. At least not in the North American markets. In some other markets, as an example, maybe in Asian markets or in other places, that might be acceptable. Here in the West, typically it's not pay to play or pay to win, right? That kind of thing, especially not long term. But one thing that you want to do is offer them different ways to enhance their gameplay, where it's not something that they're going to use, that's going to modify the gameplay, but maybe there's fluff, textures, skins, that kind of stuff. And we've talked about that before, and that's kind of a common model these days. Again, what you want them to do is opt in if they wish. Okay, you don't want to make it so that they have to spend a lot of money. And if you're going to give them the options to purchase enhancements, as an example, don't penalize them for it. That's not a great thing to do. A lot of times we complain about whales and that they spend a whole pile of money, as an example, and they get to buy all kinds of items and whatever. But remember, the whales a lot of times are the ones that support all of us for playing freemium games. So some of us might get mad at these people that do that kind of thing, but at the end of the day, they're the people that are supporting you to play the game for free in the first place. All right, and especially when one thing to notice is there's some issues nowadays with the whole loot box and pay to play or in-app purchases system. Some places in the United States are starting to look at these things as gambling, and they're starting to lock down. For example, the state of Hawaii has basically stated that children under a certain age are not allowed to use any kind of loot box system or to buy things without their parents being involved. And the reason for this is because it's like gambling for kids. So there's some ethics involved here as well. But the idea is let them decide what to do. Let the user buy. Don't force them. Don't push them. If they love your game, they're going to buy the skins. They're going to buy your art. They're going to do all those kind of things. Let's talk about some industry terms and metrics. Again, this will be on your midterm tests to some degree. All right. And again, one thing to notice about the midterm test, if I ask you about a term or a metric, it's just so that it goes through your brain, a couple of times. It's not meant for you to be stressed out about. I'm talking about the metric here, and then what I'm going to ask for, well, how does this apply? What kind of metric would you use in your game? One thing that we always want to be able to do is measure player population. A lot of times we hear these numbers like daily active users. What does that mean? It's the measure of unique users per day. And again, typically calculated over a floating 7-day period. And to qualify as a DAU, a user only has to start up the game. There's no requirement for them to play any minutes of time. So as long as I start up my game, I'm a daily active user. Okay, and this applies to pretty much everything out there. So that's the first metric, daily active users. And the next metric is monthly active users. Now, we need to know both, and we'll talk about why this is important in a second, right? So monthly active users, a measure of the number of active users in a given calendar month, typically calculate from the first day to the last day of the month. And again, it also can be shown as a current floating 30-day average. So monthly users, how many monthly people do we have? And a lot of times what we want to do is it's an aggregate usually of the daily active users over a month. And sometimes what ends up happening is with this term, there's still a lack of clarity with what constitutes a unique user, just like we talked about in the daily active users, right? So when it comes to metrics, sometimes companies might skew this number a little bit as well. What is unique? And the other one that we always want to talk about is peak concurrent users. We hear about these numbers all the time. Well, we've just reached a peak concurrent user amount of 1 million. That's huge and a very, very busy game. And what's the number, the largest number, as an example, that the game has ever had, the peak concurrent users? And a lot of times we also want to look at this ratio, okay? DAU, so daily active users, over the MAU, monthly active users. We get a ratio, and a lot of times it shows us if the PCU, the peak concurrent users, is rising or falling, okay? And if we see that the peak concurrent users is rising, a lot of times it means that the game is gathering steam. It's gathering, no pun intended, gathering interest, all right? And if the PCU is falling, as an example, especially if we see that ratio continue to fall along with the PCU, a lot of times it tells us that interest is waning. And a lot of times what we want to do is use these numbers to introduce new things. Especially when we see patterns, we see a lot of times a cycle, right? Where it takes us a month or 2 weeks or whatever for users to start to go down. And just as the users start going down, we introduce a new DLC. We introduce a new battle pass. We introduce something else to make them more interested in coming back. Okay, by the way, these metrics aren't just for mobile. So again, how do we measure monetizations and so on? One of the things we want to do is want to think about how we make money in the game. Okay, so is it the freemium model that you're using? You're getting a user to try it out for a while, and then it doesn't matter how many daily active users you have if it's the freemium model, because you're not making any money, right? That's not important for you. Really, what we want to think about is how many users are free and how many users are paying users. And so there's other metrics for those kind of users as well. One thing we always want to look at, it doesn't matter whether it's video games or websites, okay? There's something called the conversion rate. And the conversion rate, it speaks to how many users, right? The rate of how many users get converted from freemium users to paying users. How many are converted? And usually we want to look at that on a daily and monthly basis. We want to look at the conversion rates. And a lot of times, if we see that people are converting over to paid users, a lot of times there's incentives to do that. We might give them, for example, if you become a paid user, you get X number of, kind of in-game currency, whatever that's going to be. You get some free skins. You get access to a battle pass or some additional modes of play. I'm thinking Destiny. I'm thinking other games like that. Again, it encourages people to convert from a freemium user. Again, Destiny 2 is free to play, as an example, to a paid user. Okay. And the other thing we want to think about is the average revenue per user. And again, a lot of times we want to give a time period, let's say a month, and then divide the total number of users that month that are the average revenue per user. How much money are they going to pay, as an example, per month? And we want to kind of think about this as a dollar per user. How many dollars are we going to get per user, the average user? And this is every user, not just people who are in the paid model, but even the freemium model, because sometimes the freemium model, they might buy a skin or they might do something else. They haven't really subscribed. They're not paying a monthly fee. They're not, they didn't buy a season pass or a battle pass. They're just buying some skins or they're buying some in-game currency here and there, but they're not officially a monthly or a paying user. What's their average revenue that you're making from them? And the other one is a specific thing for paying users, someone who's subscribed to a battle pass. What is their average revenue, as an example? So that's something we also want to know. We want to compare those two numbers, right? Is it drastically different? Is it, sometimes, we might make more money from the average non-paying user than we do from the paying user, because again, it comes down to they pay one time, but you bundle a bunch of things for them in the battle pass, right? So, and sometimes we make mistakes that way when we create those kind of revenue systems. So we want to kind of think about this. One thing to also think about is user acquisition cost. And sometimes that has to deal with, I invite you to play the game for 2 levels and I give you some free stuff, right? And then if you invite a friend, as an example, if you acquire some kind of second user or third user for me, I want to give you some more free stuff. And it's going to reduce the amount that you're going to pay. So there's going to be, it's almost like I'm paying for users to come on board in my game, right? Sometimes I also give everybody free to play for the weekend, as an example. How much did that cost me? What's the user acquisition cost? If my game normally costs, and I'm just thinking about a Steam game, let's say a small amount of money, let's say you're early access and it costs you $20, right? But this weekend it's free to download. How much did it cost me if I just got 6,000 users? That's a lot of money, right? But how much are they going to pay, for this game long term, as an example, if they continue to buy stuff in the game and so on, if there's mechanisms in the game for you to make more money, and so on. So user acquisition cost is something that we always want to look at, as well as the lifetime value of the user. So example, that's the total amount of money that you expect to be able to extract through the course of your relationship with the user for that particular title, whatever that is. So example, if the average user gives you $1 a month and you expect to maintain each user for an average of 24 months or so, then you're thinking about the LTV of about $24 per user. But now let's say your acquisition costs, as an example, you want to, let's say your user acquisition costs, how much it costs to in-game ads somewhere in another game or something else. Maybe you're paying 35% to advertise on Steam or the App Store, the Apple App Store, as an example. And sorry, I'm kind of, my internet's kind of going in and out here. What is the user acquisition cost? Let's subtract that from the long-term value. And then what is the actual profit that I'm going to make per user over the course of the game's lifetime? Okay. And then the other one is the lifetime network value. We talked about using your friends to recruit or your users to recruit their friends, as an example. To what degree are we able to do that? And how much do we get from them? What is the network cost, the social value that we get from having our friends join us? Hey, I'm playing this new hot game, as an example, Among Us. Kind of join me, play with me, right? And then they're bringing you on. Maybe it's a word of mouth thing. Maybe there's little, if any, acquisition costs, just like you're socializing it all the time. Play with your friends, bring another friend on for only $5 a month, that kind of thing. Or $5 flat fee, that they're going to pay for the game, which is pretty awesome. Purchase as a gift for your entire family, for $2 for every person, up to 10 people. And so what's the user acquisition cost with that? All right, so we've just basically gone through user terms, metrics, and basic design principles for mobile. Any questions for this one? Again, a lot of this stuff that we're talking about here is things that you can use not just for mobile games, but also for your desktop games and your console games. It's important to know these things because we start off with, it kind of colors the way we design our games, right, in some ways. It makes us think about, and I'm sorry that my internet's kind of spotty right now. I see that it's red. When I'm putting it up on YouTube, and I do apologize. One thing that we're experiencing, guys, but I have to mention this as well, which is kind of off topic, is we're getting a crazy storm apparently tonight, starting around between 10 and 11, with lots of rain in the forecast. I'm not a weatherman, that's for sure, but it's coming up, and I'm hearing that it may produce some power outages. I know it's pretty crazy all throughout Ontario. I do apologize, but that may affect your ability to be online over the next tonight and tomorrow, especially between 11 p.m. tonight and 2 a.m. in the morning. We're supposed to get 4 millimeters or more per hour all the way until the morning, and it's going to continue on until about mid-morning tomorrow. So lots of warnings out there and all that kind of stuff as well. That may change stuff for you when it comes to accessing the internet. If you have a power outage, hang tight. I know that people are already thinking about what's happening, but it's supposed to be the rain, the rainstorm of the year for Ontario. Okay, so that's what it's supposed to be. I'm hoping they're wrong, but let's see what happens. Okay, so any questions for industry terms and metrics? I know this is the boring part, but we need to know about them because when we talk about things like daily active users, you should know what that means. And again, I'm going to ask you about that stuff. Yeah, I'm sure it is, Nicholas, and it's worrying for sure for everybody, especially if you live a little bit up north where I am right now. It might be something where you're more worried about power outages, as an example. Hey, so by the way, if I cut out, you know what happened. There we go. All right, let's do the last part of our stuff, and I'm going to try and give you back some time today to work on your encounter. And in an in-person learning example, I would get together with you and take a look and see what you've got. Show me what you've got from an encounter perspective. I can't do that with you right now, but what I can do is I can talk about this really cool case study about Magic the Gathering. So we've been doing some tabletop role-playing game case studies. The first one was Dungeons and Dragons. And I've been talking about tabletop role-playing games because at the end of the day, those are our first social games. Before we had any kind of video games and so on, we had tabletop games. Now here, this one is different. This one, Magic the Gathering, actually didn't come as early as Dungeons and Dragons, and this is some of the stuff that we found up online for you. But really, Magic the Gathering, also known as Magic or MTG, is a tabletop digital and digital collectible card game. It used to be just tabletop, and I got into Magic in the '90s when this thing first came out. I had the original standard set. Okay, so and all the rarest cards. I had all the Moxes, as an example, that just don't exist anymore. One challenge that I always have with collectible anything, and actually someone mentioned it earlier, that it's hard to keep up with standard. It's expensive to keep up with the standard set because you continually have to buy cards. That was one of the beautiful things about what made Magic popular, and the idea that it was a tournament game from the very beginning. So I know people are saying it's cheaper cheaper than modern, for sure. And so back in the day, if you want to keep standard all the time, you want to play the standard set all the time, you're always buying a box or something like that. Typically, if you're a Magic player, every 3 to 4 months. Typically, that's how it works out to be. Or you're going to Friday Night Magic and you're getting blister packs or whatever every single time, and that's okay. But when this first started off, this game, it was like, hey, I don't have time for Dungeons and Dragons, and this is how it came out for us. But we have this really cool game. It's called Magic, and it's a card game that we can play with just two of us, 2 players, right? And I've got 20 life, and you've got 20 life, and let's see if my magic spells can beat you up, kind of thing. That was what it was back in the day. And then we started realizing that there's some cards, there's rarity, because this is a collectible card game. There's rarity to the cards. And of course, we use things like sleeves to put our cards inside. We started to collect books and books of different kinds of cards and so on, and different kinds of rarity. We built several decks of cards for that particular standard set. And then some of those cards and some of those exploits, we found different kinds of exploits, were banned in tournament and so on. And eventually that standard set was retired and the new standard set came out. Some of the cards were available for you to play from the old set, legacy set. And then the new set, of course, you had to play some amount of the new set. And as it rolled, that model changed. And especially when, Wizards of the Coast was bought by Hasbro, that really changed and it became even more of a money-making venture. They came up with a digital version of this as well, which we're going to talk in a bit, which is free to play if you want to try it out. It's called Magic the Gathering Arena, and it's still very popular across PC and mobile, as well as console. So let's take a look at some of this. So basic rules, if you wanted to download or take a view of the basic rules, it's up on the Wizards of the Coast website. And really what it comes down to is whenever you get a card, it was a beautiful idea that they had. And here's a Sarah Angel as an example. You had some artwork. And again, this artwork, by the way, has changed over the years. And you had a bit of flavor text that's in here, and also some abilities that the creature would have. And this would be considered a spell. Okay, and again, forgive me if you know how to play Magic and I'm explaining something to you that you already know, but some of us haven't played this. So every part of the card, by the way, there's a lot of copycats for Magic, right? We had Star Wars, the collectible card game. We've had a bunch of collectible card games that came out just after Magic because Magic became so popular and was such a money-making engine that everybody tried to copy it. So playing the game, I mean, you can pick up a pre-made deck nowadays in the standard set, and maybe 2 pre-made decks, one for you and one for a friend of yours, and you can pretty much play right from those pre-made decks right away. All right, that's how it is now. Back in the day, it wasn't like that. Every kind of 60-card deck or 90-card deck that you bought, as an example, had a bunch of lands in there, and it was random. Okay, and that's how it used to be, a lot more than it is today. Okay, so booster packs allowed you to have a smaller number of cards that you would get, and it would be a random draw. Reminds me a lot of the loot boxes that we have today, right? So loot boxes, these blister packs or whatever, or booster packs, exactly like that. You don't know what you're going to get, and it's like literally a pay to play, right? So in many ways, what you want to do is you want to buy the whole box, which gives you a bunch of these of booster packs, and you're opening them up, and then you're going to get all these card packs, and there's going to be an X number of rare cards or ultra rare cards. If you're really lucky, that box is going to be able to something that you can sell or even trade away. Example, people got into this mode. There are different colors of mana, or which represent magic. And some people just like to play. There's different styles of play with the different colors. Each color has a meaning, almost like a culture behind it. And depending on your, your ability to play or the desire, you might like the way a white deck might feel, or a black deck might feel, or a red deck. Sometimes most people play single color decks, although there are people that also play multicolor decks, kind of a primary and secondary color. And some people play all the colors. That's pretty crazy too. I've seen that a lot of times. A lot of times the strongest decks are the single color decks because they have the most focus for the type of deck that you're going to make. There's also theme decks. I want to play a weenie deck, or I want to play a fast spell deck, or I want to play some kind of discard deck, these kind of things. And depending on the type of deck, and some of those modes of play have been, kind of like been made less and less popular over the years because of how unfair it can seem. A good example of this was when I first started playing Magic. You could play a bunch of lightning bolts as an example and land destroying cards. In a red deck. So I had a crazy red deck with all the Moxes, so as well as the Black Lotus. And I had a very, very fast deck. And I remember going to a tournament with a bunch of younger kids, and, some older parents would come in and buy them their cards. And I would be facing off. I was, kind of in my 20s at the time, right? And I was facing off with a kid who's 9 years old in a tournament. And that was allowed. You can play anyone, if anybody, because it was kind of an even playing field. Whatever cards you had, your deck could be facing off against another person's deck. And this is where the tournament comes in. And I would pull up my red deck of death. And basically I would, the kid would be defeated within like 3 turns or 4 turns. And it'd be very heart-wrenching. The kid would look at me and go, "What deck is this, that you've got?" And it was... it is pretty evil for sure. And the father would be there sitting with us because let's say he was uncomfortable leaving his 9-year-old playing with someone who's in their 20s and say, "You're a monster. Why would you play a deck like this? This isn't fun." And then I would just say that, and this is how it was when I was a kid. I would just say, "Yeah, well, we're at the tournament and we're here to win." And that's what it was, right? So it was pretty crazy. And that's how much we got into it. It was pretty serious for some of us. And then we realized that, we got to ease up. It's the fun of the game. Sometimes you lose the fun of the game when you're in a tournament. You're very, very serious and everything else. And there's, especially when a lot of people are watching you and you're like, you're in the kind of in the final four. So you're in the semifinals or the finals of the tournament, and people are watching you and they're seeing your deck and they're watching you how you're playing. It's pretty crazy. I know. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to say it's bad. It's just that's the way it was back in the day. But of course now I've gotten out of it for years. But I remember what it was like. It started social and it became serious, and it was serious because of the collectible card game. It was me. Scenario. That's why it was serious, right? So again, this is what a card looks like. The way it looks for those people who've never played before is you have 2 players. There's a person on this side, and this is us. As an example, we have a hand, and we also have a library and a graveyard. The library, all the cards on our side are our cards. So we kind of stack the deck, if you will. We want to keep it within 60 cards. We don't want to go beyond that typically. Sometimes, in some tournaments I've played, they allow decks as small as 40 cards. All right. Nowadays, it's not the same way. Pokemon Go, and Pokemon is pretty crazy. So again, so think about that where, you're playing against this. You have the battlefield where you pull out your monsters and you fight your creatures or spells, fight against them. If there's no one in front of you, you can directly attack their health. Notice that we have like a D20 on both sides, or sometimes instead of a D20, we have a bunch of chips or other kinds of little jewels or placeholders, tokens, whatever you want to call them, that represent our life. And nowadays, a lot of times we use an app in the middle of our of the table that basically one person kind of keeps track of life for both people, because it makes it more reasonable and it makes it more fair. Because sometimes we forget to take life off a person or whatever, or then that can ruin the game. So that is what the play area might look like. This is taken right from their website. And the main mechanic, which was the most interesting part, which I want to share with you, is this idea of tapping and untapping a card. So you have a card, if it's face up, it's untapped. When I tap a card, I activate it some way. If it's a land, I get energy in the form of mana, that's what it's called, from the land, and it's the same energy that the land represents. Land cards have no other value other than giving you energy, typically. Some land cards have dual purposes. Some land cards have other things that they can do when they're tapped or untapped. Okay, and sometimes they even tapping a land, especially if you can bring it out in the same turn and tap it in the same turn, actually may even leech some of your life, and that might be one of the tactics that you use in order for you to win the game, right? So again, it produces whatever kind of mana or energy that you want to use. And then, so when it comes to casting spells, each spell would have a cost on the right-hand side. Top right tells you that, for example, the Sarah Angel, she needs 3 colorless mana, so any kind of color, to generate this part, and then +2 white mana, specifically white lands or something that's going to produce white mana in order for you to, kind of cast the spell. When a card comes into play for the first time, what we have a lot of times is something called summoning sickness. So when they come into play, you can't, play the card as an example against that player right away. It takes one turn as the card comes into play where they can't really attack, but they can defend. They can block against an attacker. So that's where it's really good, that they've done that. And they also have different abilities. For example, the Sarah Angel has flying. And a lot of times if, flying flies over other attackers, and then they can't defend you if they're not also flying. Okay, so that's kind of the way it works in terms of casting spells. And like I said, it produces the type of mana when you tap a card, depending on, the mana costs. For example, in this case, this card requires 1 colorless mana and 1 black mana, as an example, but you can use any of the other colors to fill in that colorless mana slot. Okay, so that's kind of how it works. All right, so there's also different kinds of cards, and again, I'm not going to go through each of the entire game, and I welcome you to go up and take a look at it. In fact, I welcome you to go play it for free by downloading Magic the Gathering Arena, because it's free to play, and you can get the gist of how the game works. A warning, it's addictive. And if you haven't played the game before, it can suck up some of your time. So, but it translates great. So this is a game, here's an example of a game that's translated fantastically from a tabletop game into a PC game and into a mobile game. All right, so this is something that's kind of hit all the platforms, including tabletop. In fact, if anything, a lot of people play the online version, and they don't collect any kind of cards whatsoever, physical cards themselves, but they buy cards through the online version, the pay-to-play or in-app purchases method, and it's an excellent kind of translation, which is pretty cool. So again, a couple more slides, and that's it. So when it comes to attacking and blocking, if you have a card as an example, there's a creature that's attacking you, you have nothing to block. Then as an example, you get the damage that's done to you from the creature, because there's nothing, you don't have any, if you have no spells in front of you to block that creature, you take full damage. However, let's suppose you have a creature that has more health. So again, the creature's health value is usually in the attack and health value is listed in the bottom right corner of the card. Again, going back to the Sarah Angel. Power and toughness, power on the left, toughness on the right. If, as an example, you have a low power, so 2, and a higher toughness, and if the other card that's attacking you is only doing 2, that means this card didn't really kill your card, but you had enough damage to kill this card. You don't take any damage. The other player doesn't take any damage, but the other spell or creature is destroyed, which is kind of really cool. Sometimes both creatures get destroyed if they're the exact same power and toughness, right? Or sometimes your creature is destroyed if your toughness is equivalent to or less than the power of the opponent creature. So that's kind of the scenarios that you can see when it comes to attacking and blocking. All right, so again, very exciting game. It's a fast game. There's tons of tactics, and every single time they come up with a new set, as an example, and by the way, we're not even talking about planeswalkers and other things that they have in the game. This is just a very, very basic game. The basic game is what we're showing you right here. These mechanics are awesome, and they've been kind of replicated in other games. They've been replicated in not just in Hearthstone, but other kinds of games, other collectible card games out there, because they saw the popularity and the money-making power of Magic since, again, 1990s to now. Okay, and it's just chomping on. It's not going away. It's getting more and more popular, and every year, even during pandemic, the Magic the Gathering arena really kept them going. And there's, of course, other people play things like, Tabletop Simulator is also possible with Magic the Gathering, which is kind of interesting. So, again, I invite you to try it out. This is a case study. So if you've never tried Magic the Gathering, you can try it out for free by going to this website right here. And again, it's available for PC, Mac, and Android, and iOS. And if we take a look at that, you can see what that thing looks like up online. So if you go here, it's free to play and everything else. And it's not a very bad version of the game. I think it's pretty good, and there's some great tutorialization, to show you how to play the game, and you can get right into playing against other players just like yourself if you've never played before. So really, really exciting. And again, some great mechanics here for this kind of one-on-one social game. Questions, comments about Magic the Gathering, and have you played it? Do you like it? Would you play it? Do you hate it? Do you not like collectible card games or collectible anything? What's your thoughts on this thing? Anybody? So I think it's pretty awesome, but again, it really depends on how awesome it is for you. Jaden says, not much of a card game guy, but it looks very cool. Yeah, try it out. At least if you try out the online version or the download, again, free to play. It's pretty fun, and it gives you kind of a sense of how the flow works. You're into other card games like Yu-Gi-Oh? Maybe? Yeah, Yu-Gi-Oh. Yeah, I mean, and I know that there's other games, but all those games came for this game. This was the first, right? Just like Dungeons and Dragons was the first tabletop role-playing game, Magic the Gathering was the first collectible card game that we played like this. Yeah, it was always okay in the schoolyard. That's right, and that's the thing that they encourage you to play, or even at camp. I know that kids are allowed to bring their cards to camp and all that kind of stuff as well, and it's okay to do that. Pokemon. All right, so that is Magic the Gathering case study. Take a look at that. And for the last piece, Samuel says, I feel like having a good local game shop also helps, especially for tournaments and stuff. We're going to talk more about local game shops when we come to the other case study that I have, which is Warhammer 40K. I'll be talking about that kind of towards the second half of the semester and talk about some very similar things that make it a very social game to Magic the Gathering. All right. So I'm just going to do two things. I'm going to, now it's back to you. And what I mean by when I say back to you is if you're having any challenges with Unity And if I was going to make, you know, kind of a Unity thing that allows me to have multiple scenes for your group project that's due on Sunday. How do we make something, a framework? So I'm going to stop recording this now, and then the next recording, I know I'm going like a train today, guys, and I do apologize, but the next recording is going to be Unity. I'm not sure why you're hearing high-pitched sound. Maybe it was upstairs. I don't know. I'm ignoring it. But I'm going to be showing you Unity right now, and I'm going to make another recording for that right now. So let's stop this one, and let's get off this page because it's driving me crazy looking at it. It makes me feel like it's very, very busy. Okay, there we go. And so we'll stop this one, and we'll go into the Unity part.